You watched her braid her hair in the mirror, not for you, not for anyone, but for the ache itself. You were there, and yet you weren't. Silent, still, and the more still you became, the more she turned toward you, as if your absence grew a gravity more sacred than presence ever could. She smiled at your restraint, called it mystery, but what she truly feared was how much of herself she saw in your silence, how easily you could walk away, how deeply you refused to explain. You didn't pursue, not because you didn't want her, but because something older than desire stood between you. A chapel built from dread, a cathedral of detachment where her own longing bowed, and even as she clutched another man's hand, her soul leaned toward your refusal. You said nothing, and it said everything. If this whisper already knows, you let it echo. Like the video. Leave your silence in the comments. Subscribe, and let the absence speak again. The man who does not chase becomes the mirror where a woman's hidden longing condemns itself. You do not move, you do not reach, you do not beg. And in that motionless refusal, something ancient stirs in her. Not hatred, not disinterest, but recognition of a hunger she thought she had buried beneath smiles, beneath decency, beneath the trembling choreography of what it means to be desired. She watches you as if your stillness were a sentence passed down from another world. She tries to draw you out, not with words, but with subtle acts of exposure. The laugh, too loud, the skin too bare, the story told only half to the room, the other half meant for you. But you do not chase, you do not respond, you do not break. And because you do not bend, she begins to bend around you. She tells herself that you are cruel, that you must not want her, that you are void or broken or lost. But the truth gnaws at her in private that your refusal is not absence, but judgment. A judgment she cannot hear, but deeply feels. Your silence is not empty, it is a reflection, and in it, she sees herself not the woman she shows the world, but the woman she has kept in hiding, the one who craves without permission, the one who needs to be seen without being touched, the one who, if she ever admitted it, longs to be denied. She begins to obey in small ways. She checks what you liked on social media. She lingers where you stand. She starts dressing like the shadow she imagines you would love, not the bright, safe girl they raised her to be, but the dark echo of herself she cannot bear to show. She speaks your name in conversations she pretends are casual. She stops laughing around others because your silence taught her that noise is a kind of begging. And deep down, a part of her admires you, hates you, needs you. You are the mirror she cannot smash, because every time she tries, she sees herself shatter. She has chased before. She has been chased before. She has tasted the games, the love, the drama. But you are not a game. You are not love. You are something stranger. Something that resists every narrative she's told herself about men and want and power. And in your resistance, she begins to confront the architecture of her own illusions. That desire is something she should earn. That men are dogs meant to be summoned. That silence is rejection. But you are not rejecting her. You are holding up the blade and letting her see her own face in the steel. She starts obeying not because you demand it, but because you don't. You do not initiate, yet she responds. You do not text, yet she waits. You do not touch, yet she aches. This is not manipulation. This is ritual. This is what happens when a woman sees in a man the image of her own denied freedom, the permission not to perform. She does not know whether to thank you or curse you. All she knows is that something in her is unraveling, and you are the altar where it happens. You watch her break her own rules for you, rules you never asked her to make. She wears the lipstick she once said she hated. She shows up in places she once mocked. She reads the books she used to scoff at, quotes the authors you once mentioned in passing. You notice these shifts like a priest hearing silent confessions, but you say nothing. You are the one who watches, the one who does not intervene. And this drives her mad with a kind of sacred shame, not the shame of being unloved, but of being exposed. She was taught that the man who loves will chase, that silence is cowardice, that the stronger one reaches first. But you are not strong in the way she was warned about. You are dangerous in a quieter way. You see, you don't move toward what you see. You let it stand naked in its hunger. And this, more than any flirtation, strips her bare. Your inaction becomes a judgment more potent than words. She begins to question her laughter, her pose, her cleverness. Everything she used to draw love, none of it works on you. And because it does not work, she begins to wonder if any of it was ever real. She may hate you for it, but hate is just love with its mask ripped off. She may call you arrogant, but that word is the child of awe and helplessness. She may pretend she doesn't care, but care is now written in the rituals of her day, how she dresses differently when you might appear, how she stalks your silence like a prophecy. And you do not move. You remain the mirror. And that is why she obeys. Not with submission, not with words, but with a strange surrender of her persona. The part of her that performed desire now performs nothing. Because you demanded nothing, you asked for no show, you stood at the edge of the stage and waited, and in doing so, made the entire performance collapse. She is not obeying a man, she is obeying a wound, one that only opened because you refused to chase. She obeys your silence like a prayer no one taught her how to say. She does not understand why. She only knows it hurts in a holy way, because in your refusal, she glimpses what she never allowed herself to want to be truly seen, not pursued, to be watched, not claimed, to be mirrored, not saved. And when she looks away from you, tries to love someone else, tries to forget, she still finds you in the shape of her own craving, because craving cannot be killed by comfort. It can only be purified through fire. And your stillness is fire. It burns without touching, it judges without speaking, it turns her face toward itself, and she cannot bear to look, and she cannot look away. That is why she obeys, not because you are powerful, but because you are still, not because you are distant, but because you are unmoved. And in a world that tells her to perform to be wanted, your refusal to respond becomes the most unbearable form of desire. It rewrites the story, it strips the mask. It makes her ask, what am I, if not wanted? And the moment she asks that she is yours, not to possess, but to haunt. To stand still while being wanted is to awaken ancient fears of abandonment disguised as worship. You sit without leaning forward. You blink without reacting. You listen as if her voice is an echo from another century. The others fidget, perform, chase her like animals clawing at the gate of her affection. But you are the gate that never opens, the threshold that never yields. You carry something she cannot name, but deeply recognizes the posture of one who has already walked through fire and does not fear the cold. And because you do not reach for her, she begins to rise toward you like smoke to a god who never speaks. She wasn't looking for worship, not in the beginning. She only wanted to be loved in the way the world taught her was safe with effort, pursuit, and repetition. But your stillness breaks the sequence. Your detachment ignites something older than logic, something tribal, something that makes her remember without knowing how, that the gods never came, when called they only appeared in silence, in dreams, in fear, and so she begins to kneel, not out of reverence, but because her longing needs a temple, and your indifference becomes the altar. You do not reward her rituals, you do not punish her missteps, you do not guide or soothe or seduce. You remain untouched, untouching, and because you remain, she returns, again and again, like a pilgrim to a shrine that will not move for her, will not touch her, will not offer comfort. But somehow, the pain of that distance becomes sweeter than the closeness she's known before. For every man who ever loved her tried to erase her ache, but you let it grow. And in that space, she begins to worship what hurts. You are not cruel, you are simply unshaken. And your refusal to collapse into her desire makes her believe you contain something she does not. Control, depth, mystery, power. And though she might not say it, she hopes that if she earns your gaze just once, it will mean she has finally transcended her own hunger, that she has reached a place of worth beyond the chasing. But you do not gaze, you do not yield, and because of that, her need becomes sacred. Others offer her comfort, you offer her confrontation. Others lean in with softness, you lean back with silence. Others give her answers, you give her echoes, and slowly, she begins to confess not in words, but in actions. She begins to show you the parts of her she never showed to those who pursued her, the fragility behind the fire, the fear beneath the pride, the trembling behind the flirtation. She hopes you will see her and break, but gods do not break. They remain, and in your remaining, she breaks instead. She starts to study your stillness, not as a trait, but as a mystery. She wonders how you can be near her without reaching, how you can want her, and yes, she knows you want her and yet choose not to take. That choosing is what enslaves her soul, because it makes her feel that perhaps she is not enough to move you, or worse, that she is too much and you see through her, and find her lacking. That fear, that unspoken terror of being fully seen and still left untouched, is the very foundation of her obedience. She begins to ask herself questions she cannot answer. Why does she feel smaller in your presence? Why does she crave the validation of your glance more than the declarations of others? Why does your silence feel like a verdict passed down from some higher court, and the answers do not come? Only the ache remains. The ache of being unwanted, not because she is undesired, but because she is not divine enough to pull you from your throne. You do not act like a man. You act like fate, inevitable, indifferent, immutable. And in your absence of pursuit, she finds the shape of her most buried fear that love is not something one can earn through charm or effort, but a grace given or withheld by powers beyond comprehension. And she begins to make offerings, not literal ones, no, but offerings of self-denial. She lowers her voice when she speaks to you. She dresses carefully, not to seduce, but to please. She anticipates your moods without ever knowing what they are, because when a god will not speak, the faithful invent meaning. You do not notice all of it, or maybe you do, and that only deepens the cruelty. You ask nothing of her, yet she gives. You promise nothing, yet she hopes. You move through the world like someone who has already seen behind the veil and refuses to speak of what lies there. And because of that, she places her faith in you. Not the kind of faith born from trust, but the kind born from terror. The terror that if she disobeys the silence, she will never be worthy of the sound. She tries to forget you. She goes on dates, smiles too widely, kisses too soon, but every touch that comes too easily reminds her of the one you never offered. And it feels hollow, it feels cheap. Not because those men are lesser, but because your absence has redefined what closeness means. It is no longer about proximity or passion. It is about the weight of presence. And no one is as present as you, the man who does not move. This is not about power. This is about myth. You have become a myth inside her, a structure of longing that replaces her reality. She measures every man against your distance. She sees your absence in their eagerness. She hears your silence when they speak too much. And no one can compete with a God who refuses to descend. And you, do you know? Do you feel her circling, her prayers growing quieter, more desperate? Perhaps you do. Perhaps you stay unmoved because you too fear what would happen if you left the throne. If you descended into the human world and admitted you want her. Perhaps your silence is a shield, or perhaps you truly are beyond her. Either way, she cannot tell, and in not knowing, she continues the ritual. There is a moment always when she almost reaches your eyes, when she almost dares to ask why you stay so silent, why you never chase, why you never yield. But then she remembers. Gods do not answer questions, they demand sacrifices, and she gives them her pride, her certainty, her masks. You are the throne, and she obeys because it is carved from stone. Obedience arises not from dominance, but from the wound of being overlooked by someone who sees too clearly. You saw her. That was the first crime. Not her smile, not her posture, not the way she entered the room pretending not to look for someone. You saw the fracture beneath all that the girl who had never been chosen for who she truly was, only for the masks she could wear convincingly. You saw her hunger before she named it, and you did not feed it. You let it live. You let it ache. You didn't touch her, not because you didn't want to, but because you saw what it would mean. That to choose her would be to end her longing. And her longing was the only place she had ever known God. And so she obeyed, not as a game, not as a strategy, but as if you were a wound she had waited her entire life to reopen. You did not chase, and this became your authority. You did not chase, and this became her belief. She began to speak softer. She began to dress differently, not for your pleasure, but for your silence. Your non-choice became a scripture she studied in the dim hours before sleep, reading between the lines of everything you never said. She imagined herself with you in 1,000 scenarios, but always as the woman almost touched, never the one reached for. This is the ache she cannot speak of, not to her friends, not to the men who court her, not even to herself. It is a sacred ache, the ache of not being chosen by the one who saw too deeply, the ache of being found and not kept. There is no word for that, no advice column, no therapy session, no empowerment anthem that heals the sting of being fully seen and still passed over. You were not cruel, you were precise, and it is that precision that haunts her, that you saw the real her and still turned away. She does not know if she loves you, she only knows she cannot erase you. You remain like a shadow on her mirror, a ghost in her throat. And the more she tries to live as if you never existed, the more she moves in ways that echo you. She avoids men who chase too hard. She flinches when someone says they just knew she was the one, because you did know, and still, you did not choose. And that has become the holiest truth of her life, the ache that sanctifies every moment she thought she understood desire. She tells herself you were damaged, that you feared closeness, that you weren't ready, that you didn't know what you wanted. These are the myths she weaves to survive, but the part of her that obeys the secret self behind the mask knows otherwise. You were ready, you were calm, you were terrifyingly whole, And it is precisely because of that wholeness that she could not bear to be the one you left behind. She would rather be broken by a god than worshipped by a beggar. So she obeys the ache. She carries it like a relic. She wears it beneath her clothes, behind her laughter, inside her silences. Her friends think she's moved on. Her family thinks she's fine. But she knows what lives beneath the calm, the memory of not being chosen by someone who knew exactly what they saw. Not rejected, just passed by. Like a sculpture admired but not taken home. Like a secret read but not spoken aloud. Like a name written in sand, just before the tide. And you, do you understand what you've become to her? You are no longer a man. You are an archetype, a whisper, a law. You are the standard she compares the world against. You are the wound that taught her her worth is not guaranteed by being good, or beautiful, or kind. You are the silence that proves effort is not always rewarded. You are the absence that sharpened her soul. And because of that, she obeys you in every man she meets. She obeys by waiting for someone else to see her and walk away. Because the pain was holy, because your gaze was too complete, because to be chosen by you would have ended something eternal, because some part of her believes she didn't deserve it. Not yet, not then, maybe not ever. You haunt her not because of what you did, but because of what you refused to do. You refused to lie. You refused to need her in the way others did. You refused to chase just to fill a silence, and in doing so, you became the silence itself. A cathedral of unanswered questions, a shrine to the ache of almost. And now, she lives in that shrine, not always, but enough. Enough that your name is a password in her mind, a code she cannot erase. She dreams of you only when she's close to someone else. She thinks of your voice in moments of tenderness with others. Not because she misses you, but because she cannot unlearn what your absence taught her. You taught her that obedience is not about force. It is about gravity. The gravity of being overlooked by someone who had nothing to gain by leaving. The gravity of watching someone walk away slowly, with eyes that said, "I see you." The gravity of knowing that the deepest kind of ache isn't rejection. It's reverence. Withheld, and now she cannot go back. She cannot pretend that effort equals love, that attention equals intimacy, that possession equals value. You broke that spell, you dismantled the illusion, you stood still, and in doing so, made her confront herself, not the self she shows, but the self that waits in the quiet, praying to be chosen by someone who doesn't need her. She will love again. Yes. She will laugh. She will kiss. She will even marry, perhaps. But deep in the folds of her memory, there will be a name that does not ring with bitterness, only ache. Your name, the man who saw her and chose not to take her. She will obey the memory, quietly. She will return to it when her world feels too loud, when she is tired of pretending, when she is alone in a room full of love. She will return not because she regrets you, but because she needs to remember what it felt like to be seen without being seized. That is your legacy. You did not take her, you made her take herself. And even if she never says it, even if she curses you to others, even if she swears she's moved on her soul bows when it remembers, because the ache was holy, and not being chosen was the beginning of her obedience. She stands before the mirror again, not to be admired, not to be seen. The lipstick untouched, the dress zipped halfway, outside. The world hums with those who would choose her, but she waits, not for you, for the silence that once made her real.